Hello everybody and welcome to another amazing video of DIY investing. For today's video, we are going to be covering the Bitcoin price, analyzing all of our prior 4-year cycles, and giving you guys a clear understanding as to where we're at currently, how our time frames are lining up, and what we can look forward to going over the rest of this year for Bitcoin and how it's going to impact the rest of the altcoin markets. This is a very important time because Bitcoin has been outperforming in a significant way, bigger than any of the prior cycles, and I wanted to break down exactly what it means for the long term and how we can all go about making the most money possible when this next move into price discovery takes place. At any point, if you guys find any value in this, please do me a favor, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. And for anybody that wants to see how I'm investing my portfolio long term, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Now guys, the way I wanted to start off this video would be analyzing every single year from the cycle top until Bitcoin's at the point of breaking a new all-time high. And I wanted to start off by going all the way back to the beginning of our cycles because I think that this is where we're going to have the most clear understanding as to how this is stacked up in years past. Now, the only one that was really different would have been this very first cycle that we went through all the way back in 2011, 2012. And I think the main reason why is, when you're looking at Bitcoin at the bottom of this bear market, I believe it was $2 million total market cap. So it didn't have the same sort of, valuation as what we're seeing today. We didn't have the same amount of liquidity. It didn't take nearly the same amount of time to accumulate to get into a new all-time high. And so really when we're looking at these, we started sinking heavily to the 4-year cycles right over here at the peak of 2013. And this is kind of where we followed this general trend of the 4-year cycles and why I've been following it so closely. Now, the way I wanted to analyze this cycle, or each of the cycles I should say, is by going from the cycle top, the blow-off top of the all-time high, and then analyzing every single calendar year until the point of us going into a brand new all-time high. Because I think that this is a really good way to visualize where we're at or where we've been at in prior cycles, how long it's taken before we've seen price discovery, and maybe how it lines up with what we're seeing today in the current cycle. So 365 days, if we go from the cycle top for Bitcoin, is going to put us pretty much right here. And we ended up having one final capitulation lower, but this was the majority of that cycle in the bear market. If we go another 365 days, that takes us to pretty much the ending of accumulation. And then the very first higher high of that new trend. This is actually where I got into Bitcoin. I bought Bitcoin at $450, and we had just broken out of this double bottom formation. So we broke out, retested it, and then I bought my first Bitcoin somewhere right around here before we went into that second Bitcoin halving. Now, one of the things I noticed with Bitcoin cycles is it usually took about 4 years from the cycle top before we were at the point of making a brand new all-time high. And we can see that right here. It took a little bit longer before Bitcoin did go into price discovery, but we can see that, in that 2013 to 2017 cycle, I guess you could say, we went through these 4 sort of stages and they went in yearly increments. The first year was the bear market. Year 2 to year 3 would have been the accumulation and then the beginning of the new uptrend. And then year 3 to year 4 would have been the period of where we actually go into the new all-time high and start price discovery. And we can see that this is what we do inside of that year 4. This big blow off top ending exactly 1 year from that point. If we come over here, 365 days takes us to almost, pretty damn close to that all-time high. It's somewhere in the middle range, but you guys get the point. This is the general path Bitcoin has followed with these 4-year cycles, and I think it's important that, as we're looking at all of the cycles, every one of them have followed their own sort of similarities and differences. And one of the things I think that we should always remember is every cycle is going to have different price action, but the one thing that has stayed similar are the time frames. If we come over here and we do another yearly increment, this is going to give us our bear market, very similar to what we saw in that first cycle. If we go another 365 days, this puts us right here. We did end up having one more lower low. This was the COVID capitulation, but we went through a similar sort of event where it was the accumulation, then we made the first higher high. This is still a higher high from this. It's just that we ended up having that deeper pullback in the pandemic. But nonetheless, into this year 4 mark, year 3 going to year 4, that was right where we got to those prior all-time highs and started going into price discovery. So we followed a little bit of a quicker pace even in the last cycle in comparison to the one all the way back in 2013. 2013 was the longest one. This one went through the most accumulation leading into that cycle. And, this was actually the biggest cycle we ever saw for the altcoin. So in our last cycle, it was a similar amount of time total You know, in 2013, from the cycle top all the way to the point of us breaking out of a new all-time high was 1,245 days. And this one was like 1,100 days, just even under that. So it was a little bit quicker in pace by about 150 days, give or take, you know, a couple weeks. That led us into this final sort of blow off top, all-time high. If we go another year from that point, that took us pretty close to that all-time high. You know, it was actually a little bit after that we peaked, or I mean a little bit before, and then we saw this big pullback shortly after. So we followed the similar events where it takes about 4 years. We always know about the 4-year cycles. We've been following that as well. But even inside of the consolidation, the 4 years that it takes before we go into a new all-time high, that's generally the path that we followed every single one of our prior cycles. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because we want to take that same formula and we want to apply it to what we're seeing today inside of the Bitcoin price, because this is how we're going to be able to compare it and identify, you know, whether we're at a quicker pace, whether we're actually going to be syncing up to the same pace, or what it might be. So if we come from the all-time high, 365 days from, it's going to be taking us almost exactly to that bear market bottom. That was the exact week of that big capitulation that we saw with the FTX collapse. Now, if we come another 365 days, this is going to be taking us right almost into the ETF approval, right? So we've seen that we've already gone through a similar sort of period. The only real difference from this point would be another 365 days takes us to right here. And so when we're looking at this market, you know, we've seen this new all-time high, but we're kind of doing it a little bit quicker, you know. Generally, we would be coming over here all the way at the, you know, technically the end of 2024 is where this fourth line would show up, but we are actually getting into a new all-time high much quicker. If we go from the high all the way to the point of us making a new one, it was actually 850 days. We're currently 917 days in. From where we're at until we get the next point, you're looking at about 175 days. So we've got another 6 months to go before we're at that same point of us actually being at the same threshold where we've generally gone into the new all-time high, but we don't have to keep following it. You know, we've seen a much more parabolic cycle. We've seen institutions buying this cycle in comparison where in the prior ones, they just weren't interested. And so ever since the ETF was approved, we've seen way more volume than ever before. And so it makes sense why we went into this quick move. Even though we're pulling back down in here, at some point when we do start reversing, whether we go through an extended type of correction, make one more final lower low before we're at the point of actually breaking out, or whether we end up reversing somewhere at this level here before doing the same thing, it doesn't really change anything. The big picture is at this point, we're a little bit ahead of pace. But this is why things are getting interesting with us factoring in the 4-year cycles, because we've kind of known that we were at a quicker pace. We had never seen Bitcoin go into a new all-time high this fast, and a lot of that has just been driven because of all of this new ETF demand. We have billions and billions of dollars of new volume being invested into Bitcoin, and I do think it's only a matter of time before the domino effect happens with ETF approvals coming into the altcoins as well. So the same sort of thing is going to happen, and this cycle is going to be much more powerful. Now, with us just consolidating right around these previous all-time highs, I don't think that we're at that much of a quicker pace to necessarily throw us off the same sort of trend. The big thing that we've been watching for has always been the 4-year cycles, and understanding the big picture. If we're going to continue to follow these 4-year cycles, then, you know, this could be the one where we do see a little bit of a deviation from our, you know, normal trend, I guess you could say. And so coming over here and actually looking at this chart, this is going to give us a clear understanding of, you know, where we're looking at it in comparison with the prior cycles, because all of the prior cycles, when we're analyzing from peak low to peak low, this is the monthly time frames, keep in mind, so we're going to be looking at that. Now remember, when we're looking at the 4-year cycles, you're analyzing peak low to peak low. 1,430 on this monthly, and this one ends up being 1,431 as well. So when we're looking at both of these cycles, we've just started a brand new one. We're at the point of us getting into a new all-time high. Nothing is really that different from anything I've seen in the prior cycles. You know, we go through a little accumulation after we end up finding our capitulation low. We go through a little bit of an uptrend. Once we hit that all-time high, well, that's when the real price discovery starts. All of our consolidations have been a little bit different, mainly going into our last cycle with this big COVID capitulation, but we still kind of held the same similar type of trend line before going into price discovery. Now, when I'm looking at our current cycle, out of the bottom of our 4-year cycle low, we've seen a lot more of the same similarities. The only question now becomes is, do we see one more final low back down to retest that level? before going into a new all-time high, or are we going to end up following a little bit of a quicker pace, kind of how I was just sharing with you with the prior charts? We're at a little bit more of a front running, I guess you could say, than any of the prior cycles. So all of them have taken a much longer period of time. Now, one of the ways that we can identify how a change in the 4-year cycle is going to develop is through what side of the mid-range point of the 4-year cycle the price peaks on, because that's going to give us whether the cycle ends up being a right or left translation. So what I mean by that, if we take half of 1450, we're going to get 725 about, so we're just going to take it from 730 right here. And then we're going to draw another line, because this line is going to give us our mid-range, right? We're going to change the color to red, and this is going to give us the mid-range of the cycle. So notice here how in this cycle, being 2017, Bitcoin peaked on the right side of this mid-range. See how we have the left side and then we have the right side. Notice how Bitcoin's market cycle peaked on the right side of that point. That tells us that Bitcoin was a right translated cycle. And this has been the path that we followed every single one of these bull runs. We can do the same thing, 731 right here. We can draw another line. And then this will give us the same similarity where, looking at the mid-range, what side of the market cycle did we peak on it? Well, we're looking at the right side once again, right. Even if you looked at the cycle top being 65K, if you called this a double top or something, regardless of what you're looking at it, both of these ended up peaking on that right side. So when we're looking at every one of the prior 2 cycles leading up to this one, we've seen a right translation. What that means is most likely we're going to get continuation of the same trend. Up to this point, it's been 4-year cycles. So if we end up having a right translation, most likely the scenario ends up being we're going to continue to play out in that same pattern. Now, I'm going to remove these drawing tools. You guys can take a screenshot if you want, but I'm going to remove them, and we're going to take a little bit more of a focus on what we're seeing right now, applying the same principle. So peak low of this cycle would have been right here. So we're going to look at this, and we're going to be going 4 years from that point, because that's going to give us our projected next 4-year cycle low. So you're looking at the end of 2026 sometime. That's going to be where our projected 4-year cycle low is, either November or October. It doesn't really matter which one you draw it. 1430 has been all of the prior bear markets, so we're just going to stick with that same numbers so we don't confuse anybody. Now, when we're looking at the mid-range point, we're looking at the same thing, 730 days. So whatever side that this cycle peaks on in the mid-range point, that's going to know whether it's a left translation or a right translation. So we're going to do the inverse. We're going to look at 2 red lines, and then the mid-range is actually going to be a yellow line. And we're going to be noticing that currently the price is on the left side of this mid-range point. Notice how all of these other prior cycles were peaking on the right side of the mid-range. That's because they were right translated cycles. So because we're at a quicker pace, because Bitcoin has taken a much shorter period of time to get us into those prior all-time highs and even into new all-time highs, it shows that this is already a difference, right? So we're wondering, are we going to end up seeing a little bit of a lengthier consolidation in here? Are we going to see a couple more months of consolidation? Maybe we retest that 50K level or something like that, all the way back down to this lower high to begin our bear market. And then, we go into that new all-time high. At that point, we would be looking at a right translation. Even if it just barely peaks on this right side, it's still a right translated cycle. Nothing is really going to be changing in our perspective. The only difference is if we're looking at this cycle, not having a lower low, maybe we just start breaking out where we're at right now, and we start front running, and maybe we're sitting at like 120 to 150, $200,000 per Bitcoin, and we're still on this left side of this mid-range point. At that point, we're going to be looking at most likely an early cycle top and a left translated cycle. So we don't fully know what's going to play out. This thing could easily just be a more parabolic right translated cycle where maybe this thing runs up and we just keep going, and then we just have this ginormous sort of bull market before we peak and have your normal conventional 4-year cycle. This would be your normal 4-year cycle, even though I drew this going to 400K. Understand that I'm just trying to help you guys visualize what we're looking at here. But this is what we would generally follow, where we'd have a cycle top sometime at the end of the year, 2025. We'd have a 1-year bear market in the same ways that all of these ones have been, 365 days. Correct, big move, right? And we'd peak on the right side of this mid-range. That's what we would do if we follow a normal 4-year cycle, right? Even if we didn't make this new top and we ended up peaking over in here, it's still a right translated cycle. Nothing is going to be changing in that regard. But in my opinion, if we're looking at that, we're just going to follow your same 4-year cycle, because that'd be 4 years from the last bear market bottom. We would be following the same, similarities that we had followed in all the prior cycles. So this would be a right translated cycle. This is what's going to happen if we just follow a normal, typical bull run, except it just ends up being more parabolic in nature than maybe we've ever seen before. Because so far, that's exactly what's playing out. Bitcoin going into a new all-time high in 850 days is a very quick move. I mean, it's much quicker than any of these other ones. We can see that just by comparing these real quick. 1100 days. Coming over here and looking at this one, you're looking at 1250 days. So it was a much longer period of accumulation to get these same sort of cycles. Looking at Bitcoin today, already at that new all-time high, even though we're pulling back, we're looking at this thing at a much quicker pace. So I don't really know what is going to play out, whether we have a normal 4-year cycle and we peak on the right side and have a right translation, or whether this thing ends up just kind of front running into a very quick parabolic top, and then we have this left translated cycle. The big thing I want you guys to understand is the bear market bottom doesn't change. We're still targeting our 4-year cycle low to be the end of 2026, because you're always looking at the cycle from peak low to peak low. You're not measuring the cycle tops as, anything. You're not factoring in the cycle tops, because aside from the left or right translation, they don't really mean anything, and the cycle tops vary. The 4-year cycles and cycles for any matter of any time, they're always measured from the lows. So when you're looking at this, it's important to understand that the only difference would be if we peaked on the left side of this mid-range, we would just have a longer bear market, right? Instead of having a normal 1-year bear market like this one here, we would end up having like a 1.5 to a 2-year long bear market, leading into the exact same bear market bottom being at the end of 2026. 4 years from the last bear market bottom, right? That's what we're looking at in your conventional cycle. Nothing really changes with the 4-year cycle bottom. We're still inside of the 4-year cycle. The only difference is, are we going to peak early, or are we going to have a normal, cycle top leading us 3 years from the cycle low? That's what this first example right here shows, which I'm going to actually change the color to white so you can see it a little bit better. And our red example would be the left translation. But this is the two scenarios I see playing out for us, guys. And I want to keep you guys aware, because it's super important that we're playing these. Because if we're understanding how the cycles are playing out, if we're understanding the potentialities, we can at least understand that we can take profits, we can position ourselves and be prepared regardless of how our plans may or may not differ. So I want us to just be aware of this, because this is the only thing that I've found in the market to follow such extreme precision, looking at each one of these prior cycles doing almost the exact same thing. The most important thing to understand is the 4-year cycle and how we have followed them every single one of our bull markets. And nothing has changed. We're still following a 4-year cycle. We still ended up bottoming 4 years from that prior cycle. So looking at every one of these being exactly the same, we can't really expect anything to differ with the cycle low. The only thing we can expect to differ is when the cycle top is going to be. Are we going to have an early one? Are we going to have a late one? So big picture, I just wanted you guys to be aware of this, break down some of the thoughts, analysis that I'm seeing inside of the market, how we can be best positioned, because the best way to take profits on altcoins is understanding Bitcoin, because when Bitcoin tops, everything drops, and altcoins end up getting crushed on the way back down. So as long as we know how to take profits, we understand where the differences, where the similarities line up, this gives us the best strategic advantage to make money in this market. So guys, if you found any value in this video, please do me a favor, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of these videos. For anybody that does want to see how I'm investing a cycle, where I will end up taking profits, how I'm going to be looking to invest my portfolio over the course of this bull run, links are in the description to go ahead and sign up on my website. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. And with that being said, I'll catch you in the next one. As always, peace out.